Just before we get into this video, guys, I want to hit 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So if you could help me out, if you haven't subscribed to the channel already and you do like the content, hit that subscribe button because it's free. I'm not going to charge you. So hello and welcome to another episode of Why You Should Watch, and this one is only approximately 10 years out of date. So I'm going to be talking about a show that I never actually watched when it came out. I think I saw bits of it, maybe, but I never really sat down and fully watched it until a few weeks ago. I was proper bored and I was like, I actually don't know what to watch. This is on Netflix. I've never seen it before. People keep telling me that it's a really good show. I've heard it's got stuff to do with superpowers, so let's give it a go. And lo and behold, I watched it and I actually quite liked it, so let's talk about it, which is of course Misfits. Now, for those of you who don't know, the two of you that probably don't know what Misfits is, it was a series a few years ago that was about a group of people who are on community service. There's like a lightning storm, they end up getting superpowers from it, but they're not the only ones, quite a few other people do, and it just sort of goes from there. And you're following these 5 characters for 2 seasons at least, and seeing how they cope with having superpowers and if it does affect them, and seeing how they clash as people because their personalities are clearly very, very different. From the off, what I've got to say is I love how British this series is, and I know that sounds a little bit weird and like proper Brexit and everything, but I do really like how they approach it because we don't really tend to see British superheroes. It's always usually over in America, like with the Marvel and DC stuff like The Boys, Invincible, whatever it might be that's come out in the last few years. It's always usually New York or fictional versions of these American cities. To see them just like some British twat teenagers doing community service is actually quite refreshing, because the English and the British in general do things quite differently to the Americans, and that culture difference, but seeing them with superpowers, is fascinating to me. There's a character, for example, called Kelly, who is a proper chav, and I don't really know if there are chavs in America, but seeing a chav with superpowers just blows my mind. But it's not just that, there is a story arc throughout the entire series, or at least for certain chunks of it. I think there is kind of an overlying story with one of the characters in particular, who, I will say this, it's Simon, and I keep thinking his name is Greg or something, by the way. I never seem to remember his name. I know that Nathan jokingly calls him Barry, but I genuinely thought his name was like Greg or George or something. Anyway, with Simon, he starts off as a bit of a wet lettuce, and I don't really, not that I dislike him, I don't really enjoy watching him in the first few episodes, but as the series progresses, he slowly becomes one of my favourite characters. I'm not going to give away why, although people probably know already, but there's a really cool story arc with him that I think is really bittersweet, to be honest. You've got Curtis, who is a disgraced athlete. He was caught with cocaine and that just sort of ruined his entire athlete career, and he's got the power to turn back time, or at least bring himself back in time, or reverse time, or something like that anyway. And that's pretty cool, and it comes in handy in quite a few situations. It also is quite funny in certain situations as well, where there's a certain character who we get introduced to in one episode, and this is sort of like the GTA episode for those of you who have seen it, and something happens and they do say to Curtis like, oh, change it, and he's like, yeah, I'm not feeling it. And it's stuff like that where I'm like, that's actually really funny. Like, what a dickhead, but I kind of get it. You've got Alicia, who out of the originals is probably my least favourite. I think purely because her superpower is the worst. She just touches people and they want to have sex with her, which, how practical is that? Like, I don't really see how good of a superpower that is. Like, I get sort of telekinesis, I get stuff like changing time, invisibility, all this sort of stuff, but making people hump you, I don't know. And I think her story arc does get a little bit better throughout the series, but I think initially she is the most dislikable character, and also she has the worst power initially, so yeah, for that I'm like, meh. And then of course you've got Nathan, who seems to be everybody's favourite character. Now here's the thing with Nathan, he's only in the first 2 series, and I do really enjoy him, but I've got to say Rudy, who comes in and replaces him, I don't think there's that much of a drop off there. I actually quite like Rudy as well. Nathan though is an Irish lad, which is very close to my heart as I'm half Irish, and he is just a gobshite. Like, he has no filter whatsoever. He'll say whatever the fuck he wants, regardless of how inappropriate, stupid, cringeworthy it is, he'll just come out and say it, or just do something stupid. He is probably the linchpin in the first 2 series, I've got to say. He is a very, very enjoyable character to watch. I won't tell you what his superpower is because they don't tell you straight away, but it's, when you find out what it is actually quite funny, especially how they deal with it in the 2nd series initially as well. I did quite enjoy those moments. Oh yeah, I didn't even mention that in the 1st series there is like a running gag that you don't actually know what Nathan's power is yet. The stuff in the first 2 series, that happens and it's really, really enjoyable. There's like stuff with the probation workers. That's a running gag as well. I won't tell you specifically what it is, but there's a running gag with them. And then you move into the 3rd series and Nathan inexplicably leaves. I know there's like a mini webisode that sort of bridges the gap, but I think the actor just wanted to leave, which is fair enough. And then they replace him with Rudy, who I mentioned before, who's played by, I can't think of the guy's name, but you'll recognise him from This Is England. And like I said, I don't think the drop off from Nathan is as deep as people make it out, because I've heard people say don't even watch anything after series 2 because Nathan's not in it, and I don't think it's as bad as people make out. Series 3 is probably my favourite series, if I'm being totally honest. Rudy really does fill that Nathan hole, and what I love about Rudy's character is his power is he doesn't really split himself, it's just his personality forms into other sides of himself. So typically you will see just like his shy, insecure, anxious side just pop out all the time, and seeing him with this more bolsterous Rudy that is clearly a front, but seeing those two interact with each other is really fucking funny. Then in, well, the end of series 3, the majority of the original cast are gone. There's still one person left. I won't tell you who it is because I won't give away spoilers or anything. But then from series 4 onwards, you get a new cast of characters, and Rudy's still there, obviously. But the others, they come in and, I don't know, that's for me when the show really takes a dip in quality. I think the first half of series 4 is actually pretty good, particularly because one of the original cast members is still there for a bit, but then that person leaves for whatever reason, and from there you're kind of left with Rudy, who you like, or at least I like, and then these other characters who are fine, but they kind of just feel like rehashed versions of the characters that came before, but more dull. And it seems like the superpower aspect, which was quite strong early on, doesn't really appear as much, and it feels like the superpower stuff, they don't really do much with it in terms of the Misfits themselves. It's just sort of like a villain of the week type thing. And something that really annoyed me in series 4 was it felt like there was a good few episodes where Rudy is like front and center, but it's just one version of him, whereas the interactions with him and his softer side or anxious side, however you want to word it, like, they're not there. And I think whilst I am going to say in a video like this, obviously it's called Why You Should Watch, this is a series that you definitely should watch if you are after a sort of superhero thing with a difference. But the drop in quality for me is considerable, and I do think that whilst it is worth the watch, particularly the first 3.5 series, after that maybe do give it a miss, because whilst it's not awful, it's not unwatchable, it is enjoyable. There's still humorous moments, there's still some interesting plot developments and story arcs for certain characters. It just isn't quite the same as what it once was, and I do think that as much as Rudy tries his best to keep the show afloat, the other characters just don't have that weight behind them. And to be fair, I do think by the end of series 3, it wraps things up quite nicely, so anything after that is a bit of a bonus anyway, in my opinion. But there's like some mad shit in this series. There's a Nazi episode which is weird as fuck. There's like a zombie episode. There's some really personal stuff as well, and there's honestly one of the creepiest guys in the entire show, before I move on to the personal stuff, is this guy who can control milk. As soon as I've said that, if you haven't seen it, you will laugh at that. You won't be fucking laughing when you watch the episode, because some of the shit that that guy does is mind-blowing, and the fact that they even thought of that, it's such an original idea. It's not like it's, you know, super speed, super strength, flight, all that sort of stuff. No, it controls dairy products. Like, they do some shit with it. But like I say, there are some personal moments as well. I think the stuff with Nathan and his family in particular that really are not upsetting to watch, but you do feel for Nathan, and you do kind of wish that things weren't as bad for him, and you do kind of see why he is a bit of a boisterous prick, because sometimes it's used as a deflection more than anything. I think some of the stuff with the zombies, actually, particularly with Curtis, is actually quite sad as well. Simon and Alicia as well, they've got a story out together that is really surprisingly sweet, but also really sad at the same time. But yeah, overall this is a very good show, but do bear in mind that it does dip in quality a little bit. I say a little bit, quite a bit. But still, you haven't seen it, give it a go. You might like it. In the comments below though guys, let me know what you think of Misfits. Have you seen it? Have you not? Whatever it is, let me know down below. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure that you leave a like on it, subscribe for more. Social media and Patreon links will be in the description as always. So if you'd follow me on any of those things, then I'd absolutely love you forever. But till next time guys, you take care of yourselves. Goodbye.